Hi, welcome to Chapter 4 and 5, where we're going to start getting into criminal justice policy and theory this week. All right, so criminology. You need to understand, since we are in CCJ 230, that criminology is the study of crime and punishment. In this week lecture series, we are only going to begin to touch on some of the schools of thought regarding crime. There are a ton because we're dealing with human beings and we're dealing with a lot of reasons that human beings do the things that they do. And a lot of people have come up with a lot of good theories and reasons, and some maybe not so good, depending on your thoughts and your beliefs. And some over the years, those reasons have changed and our thoughts have changed. So, what I've done here is I've kind of compiled a list of them and more of the more popular ones. And there's still a lot of them, but realize that these aren't all of them, and there's still a lot of them. So, I've composed them because it is two chapters. I've composed them in two different parts. So, this is the first video, and we're going to have a second video as well. All right, so there are many different schools of thought regarding crime. So, as you know, a long time ago, torture was very common during much of our ancient history. In fact, they used to take people out into the common parts of town, into the area where you used to sell all the goods and wares, and they would say, okay, these are the people that committed the crime, and they would, whatever torture was going on in that area, they would cut people's ears off or their fingers off, or they would lay a huge block of concrete on them, and they would sometimes torture, sometimes even kill them by taking their breath away or whatever they were doing, or throw lettuce or vegetables, rotten vegetables at them. And then during the second half of the 17th century, which is in the 1600s, a new movement came out, and that was the Enlightenment period. And people in the Enlightenment period were interested in crime and what punishment should be. And they said, hey, torturing isn't good. And so it was Enlightenment. And so people thought, hey, the classical school of criminology emphasized the idea that, hey, people make choices to commit crime, and that punishment should be about preventing future crimes from being committed. So they came out with what we called the theory of crime, and they started doing research on why people were committing crime, and they started making policy on that. And a theory became a set of ideas that was used to explain a particular phenomena or concept, and it helped explain what causes crime and why people engaged in criminal behavior. And there became a theory of crime, and it became divided into two primary categories. The first being the micro theories of crime, which micro means small, so it focused on the individual differences between law-abiding and law-violating behaviors. And then you had the macro theories of crime, so that's your larger, which explored the large scale of social explanations for crime, such as poverty and community disorganization. So normally in class, I have you start by looking at this, and this really opens the world of the criminal justice system. And I'm going to ask this question first, and I want you to think about it. So here we go. Imagine that you, and if you're alone in your room watching this, have an opportunity to steal $1 million. It's a lot of money. Imagine what you could do with that $1 million. What would you do with it? Make a list in your mind. What would you do with that $1 million? And imagine that you have no chance of getting caught. None. No chance. None at all. Would you steal the money? Right now, just give me an answer. Yes or no. Don't think about it. Just yes or no. Okay? Well, let me tell you, we had a class. I've had lots of classes where they've answered that. And I got to tell you, I normally get two different answers. Okay? I get a group that say, undoubtedly, yes, they would steal the money. Yes, they have no chance of getting caught. Of course, they'd steal the money. I have another group that says it depends on who they're stealing from. If they were stealing from a billionaire or really a rich person, of course, they'd steal the money. If the money was coming from somebody who really saved up and worked really hard and they just had like $1 million themselves or a couple million, no. ever so often I'll have a person or two that just ethically, they just couldn't do it because it's just not right. But those are basically your answers that you get. Okay, second part of my question. Now imagine that you have an opportunity to steal that $1,000,000 again. However, you have a 50% chance of getting caught. Yes or no? Yes or no? Answer right away. Okay, well, let me tell you what answers I get. Normally, it goes down about 50%. About half of the students will continue on and still steal the money, and the other half don't want to risk it. Well, that's kind of our criminal justice system. You start thinking about the 3 C's, the cops, the courts, corrections, and that's why you really need your checks and balances, because that's what starts happening is you start giving each one, the cops, the courts, and corrections, a little bit of power, a little taste, a little bit of, hey, this is what people do and you don't like the outcome, and people start taking the power into their own hands and deciding how they want to deal with it. You did. I gave you a chance to steal $1,000,000 and your ethics just went out the window. I've seen the students do it every day. Ethically, you shouldn't steal it. Stealing is wrong. We know that, right? That's why we have our laws. However, you threw that out because you thought you knew right? I mean, we have classes on ethics. Aren't ethics supposed to mean something, right? However, we again think we know better, and that's what ends up happening. That's why checks and balances and transparency is so important. We need somebody watching it. I told you there's no chance of getting caught. That's why we need transparency. That's why we need people watching us. But this is really important. So, and that's why we all see things differently. That's why we need checks and balances, especially in our criminal justice system, because some of us see a blue dress, some of us see a gold dress. That Yanny and Laurel. Did you hear Yanny? Did you hear Laurel? I listened to it for a while when I first heard Yanny, and then I heard Laurel. I hear both now. So we all see things differently. If we have time, or on our next video, I'm going to play this video for you, because you're going to see how when we're young, our brains are elastic. What the heck? But as we get older, they get less elastic. Oh, how sad, but it's so true. Oh my goodness. So let's continue to talk. So classic school and theories of crime. So rationality, what does that mean? The classical school and rationality. What did they think? Well, they assumed that, hey, people have free will, that people choose to commit crime. For example, Jordan decides to steal some candy at a store. He's not forced to. They don't believe that he's predestined to steal some candy. Not only that, he thinks about it beforehand and he says to himself, hey, I really want that candy. I don't have any money, so I'm going to steal it. This is rational thinking that goes into his planning to commit the crime. And there's also what we call hedonism. It's the classical school's way of assuming that, hey, people seek pleasure and they avoid pain. For example, Jordan looks at that candy and he goes, yum, that's going to taste really good. I'm hungry, so I want to steal that candy. The classical school theory of crime has some key principles. Number one, with punishment. Remember how we said the idea that with hedonism, people want pleasure, we want to avoid pain. It's kind of that hot stove theory. If we think it's red and it's going to hurt us, we're not going to go up and touch it. We're going to avoid touching it. And if we want that candy, hey, it's kind of worth stealing it because we want to eat the candy. Even if we don't have the money, who cares, right? So if Jordan thinks about stealing the candy, even though he realizes he could go to jail for it, he might not steal it because, hey, there's punishment for that. But yet again, he knows he could go to jail for it, but he really wants that candy, so he weighs his own rationality for it. There's also that idea of deterrence, which is there's a fear for, punishment that can influence his behavior. And people are rational, and we have free will, but we are hedonistic and we do want that candy. So that's kind of the classical theory of crime. To me, it kind of all just makes sense. It's easy to think through what the classical theory of crime is saying. All right, so deterrence. understand what deterrence is, you need to know what it is. It discourages action through instilling fear about consequences. And Beccaria, Caesar Beccaria, had three principles of punishment, okay? And you need to know these. He said, hey, your punishment, your deterrence needs to be swift, it needs to be certain, and it needs to be severe. So swift, certain, and severe. All right, so we have our two different triangles. We have our crime prevention triangle and we have our crime deterrence triangle. Our crime prevention triangle says that there is three parts to our triangle. There's desire, there's ability, and there's opportunity. If you have those, you'll have crime prevention. Our crime deterrence triangle says there's desire, which is the same as crime prevention. However, there's also the likelihood of being caught and the gravity of harm if caught. Deterrence says punishment must also be proportionate to the harm caused. So if we lose proportionality, there is little to prevent or discourage the criminal from committing a more severe crimes and engaging in worse behavior. So punishment used to keep order, not avenge crime. So deterrence can't be like being a vigilante, not at all. All right, so this is something you can pause on. I'm not going to go over it. This is just something I used to use and hand out to students. All right, your rational choice theory. So now we're going from the classical to the rational. And again, this is something that just makes sense. So let's look at an example. Chris wants to know why the intruder broke into his apartment because he's mad. His things got stolen. He was burglarized. His apartment got broken into. He wants to know, is it because the intruder was born with a biological defect that made him choose his apartment? Or is it because of the intruder's upbringing? Or was it something else? Well, the rational choice theory basically says, no, the criminals weren't born that way. The criminals weren't brought up. Criminals make a rational choice. They make a logical choice about what circumstance under which they want to commit the crime. So example, the burglar might have just seen that Chris had left a window open to his apartment. Uh-oh, Chris. If that window hadn't been open, the burglar might have moved on to another house, another easier target. But Chris left his window open and gave the criminal an opportunity to rationally consider options and realize that the job was just made easier by the open window. So it had nothing to do with his upbringing, nothing to do with his morals or anything. An important element of rational choice theory is the idea that people will actually weigh their options, possible pleasure from committing the crime against the pain from the punishment. So they may think, hey, I might not get caught. And if I get caught, it's only my first time, so I might get a warning. My other friend got caught and he just got a warning. So they'll act accordingly. They call that the hedonistic calculus. Kind of sounds like math, huh? The word hedonism means seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, and calculus is a type of math. So essentially, hedonistic calculus is doing math around the idea of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. All right, we're going to stop here at Caesar Beccaria. We talked about Beccaria with being swift. Remember, we just talked about that, severe. And I will see you for part 2 of our lecture series, and I will also explain the assignment, which is our journal, where you're actually going to go out and look at some cars committing some traffic violations. So if you want to know how to complete the assignment due this Sunday, see the next video lecture series. Thanks.